Hey all, this is something of a finale to my series which critiques every single one of these movies in far more detail than I'll talk about here. I'll leave a link in the description to the playlist for that. I have watched 38 films in this series and have ranked all of them according to my own tastes, and we'll be going from worst to best here today. Without further ado, this is my list of every DC animated original movie ranked. Unknowns. These are the films that I haven't watched. These are Constantine, City of Demons, a series of shorts that were later compiled into a film, Superman, Man of Tomorrow, and Justice Society World War II, which are both in continuity with each other, which hints at another rebirth universe, Batman Soul of the Dragon, a standalone, and Batman The Long Halloween, which is being released in 2 parts. With the exception of Constantine, these all came out after Apokolips War, which is the point at which I chose to end my series, and as such, none of them will be ranked. All good to go? Great. Now. Number 38, Superman vs. the Elite. Score, 1 out of 10. When a movie is based on only one issue of one comic, it was always going to have pacing problems, but while the voice acting is good and the direction is okay, nothing can really save the awful story. Both the heroes and villains are idiots and straw men to push this weird agenda of keeping superheroes lighthearted or whatever. The method they use for that is the Elite, who torture prisoners at the first available opportunity and murder the leaders of 2 warring countries for the lulz. And these guys are supposed to be the other side to the moral debate on whether superheroes are going too soft on crime. Notice a problem? Number 37, Green Lantern First Flight. Score, 1 out of 10. Ah, my first foray into the 1 out of 10s in this catalog. I was shocked upon my first viewing of this film at just how incompetent one of these movies could be. I mean, they're superhero movies. How hard could it be to make one? Apparently, the bar was still too high for the makers of First Flight, which has all of the hallmarks of a bad film. An idiotic set of villains, a non-functioning power system, a boring main character, and possibly the worst animation of the entire catalog. And not only direction, but planning and straight-up execution as well. This movie has it all. I'm not quite sure how they made Green Lantern, a concept revolving around creativity, boring, but they did it. It features the most bare-bones betrayal storyline ever, and absolutely nothing about the movie resonates, at least not in any way they intend. But hey, if you like pointing out logical inconsistencies like me, then this is right up your alley. Number 36, Suicide Squad Hell to Pay. Score, 1 out of 10. I want to say that this movie is even worse because it being made forced the writers to misguidedly include the squad in Apokolips War, but I won't hold that against this movie. That said, there is nothing to enjoy here. None of the squad is interesting, the animation is at its worst within the New 52 line, the mission for the squad is completely incongruous to their modus operandi, and there are too many plot threads. Vandal Savage and Reverse Flash, arguably 2 of DC's greatest villains, are wasted on this movie. Nice. Thanks. The only reason that this isn't in last place is because it didn't have anything in its runtime that personally offended me as a creator. Even if everything was bad and there were no redeeming qualities, there also wasn't anything so awful that it made me more mad than when I watched both Superman vs. the Elite and First Flight. I know, damning with faint praise. Number 35, Son of Batman. Score, 2 out of 10. I realize I said in the Son of Batman review that First Flight was better than it, and that might be true from a technical perspective, but I can't deny that this movie and these characters had far more potential to eventually become good than anyone in First Flight. While Damian Wayne is absolutely insufferable and the League of Assassins are woefully incompetent, the designs are at least cool and consistent, and while the animation and direction are arguably worse than First Flight, it's much funnier here because of the wacky physics and straight up logical errors, unlike the theory crafting that was required when I complained about First Flight. That said, this movie is still very bad, maybe objectively more so than any of the 1 out of 10s, but I enjoyed watching this one a teensy bit more than those, so there. Number 34, Batman Year One. Score, 2 out of 10. A case study in how not to adapt a comic book. I know that adaptations are hard, but in film, internal monologues don't work more often than they do. And more than anything, what I remember about this movie was the awful internal monologue from every character. And let's not leave out the film's other issues. Glacial pacing, especially for a film that's only an hour long, bad direction during action scenes, and a non-climax. All of these contribute to a thoroughly boring experience. I don't don't fall asleep during movies, but I came very, very close when I watched this one. Steer clear if at all possible. Number 33, Batman Bad Blood. Score 2 out of 10. With a lot of New 52 movies, the complaints are generally the same: bad direction and animation, and lack of proper focus on its characters, leaving the film with no tension whatsoever. All of this holds true for Bad Blood, and this one hurts more than most because it actually has a decent first third. Kate Kane is one of the more interesting characters that the New 52 introduced in its early portions, and it would have been interesting to explore her dynamic with the Dick and Damian team found in this movie. Unfortunately, everything falls apart after about a half an hour, and from there, it's just a slog to get through the rest. With wasted and inconsistent villains, no character arcs for any of the threads that the first third carefully set up, and the worst climax of the New 52, yeah, I'd call this one a dud. I guess you could say I had some bad blood with this movie. Wait, I already made that joke. Number 32, All-Star Superman. Score 3 out of 10. Maybe my having read the comic book colored my opinion on this movie a fair bit, considering its counterpart has one of the most potent messages about overcoming hardship and always believing in oneself, and the film's attempt at replicating said message was limp. That said, I don't think I would have viewed it much more highly if I hadn't read the comic. Its pacing is just terrible, and none of the plot threads that do carry over between the vignettes end up mattering. The vignettes themselves are the biggest contributor to the issue with the rest of the movie. Its structure doesn't give us time to connect to any of the characters, and the constant setup and hasty climax to each little self-contained story quickly becomes exhausting. As I said in the review, this movie is left rotting. Number 31. Batman and Harley Quinn. Score 3 out of 10. If ever there was a film in this catalog that shouldn't have been here, it was this one. Stealing the art style from the much-beloved DCAU, it tells a completely incongruous story which preys on nerd-stalgia. And for what? Fart humor, which definitely belongs in a Batman story. The plot was terrible, the animation for aping off the DCAU was also surprisingly stiff, and the characters were just joke machines, even Batman himself. Any attempt that the movie made at having a proper character beat was quickly lost due to either boner humor or the pathetic excuse for a villain. Yes, Rob Paulson's rendition of Don't Pull Your Love is fantastic, but other than that, stay as far away as possible. Number 30. Justice League Dark Apokolips War. Score 3 out of 10. With how much I dreaded watching this movie, both because it was the end of my series and because of the plot beats I'd heard about beforehand, I was actually surprised that I liked it as much as I did. Granted, I still didn't like it, as you could tell from the score. It's bloated, which is one of its two main flaws. It tries to follow up on far too many plot threads for an hour and a half, and some of them don't even logically follow from where we left off in them, such as with Batman's resolution at the end, or Constantine's entire character. Speaking of, its second main flaw is Constantine himself, who flat out shouldn't have been the main character. His story and inclusion were so far removed from the League's conflict with Darkseid that I'm actually surprised they managed to fake him into relevance at all. Either way, with maybe the most insulting ending of any superhero film I've ever seen, and such comical amounts of edge and gore, I don't want to watch this movie again for a very long time. Number 29. Justice League Crisis on Two Earths. Score 3 out of 10. I suspected when I watched this movie that it would end up toward the middle of my list, but as you can see, that didn't happen. It's still boring as sin, which is its main flaw. Contributing to this are worthless scenes like the debates, the entire Justice League and Crime Syndicate being boring and one-dimensional, and the most interesting part, Owlman, also being the most annoying character. His plan simply doesn't make sense from a logical perspective, but I won't get into that again here. The rest of the movie is subpar as well, with bad animation and poor establishment of settings and props for the action scenes. It's such a shame that this movie was sandwiched between other better movies like Public Enemies, Under the Red Hood, and Apokolips, because honestly, it would have fit right in with most of the New 52. Number 28. Justice League Throne of Atlantis. Score 3 out of 10. Speaking of boring, that's the name of the game once again. Even for a New 52 movie, the villain was so underwhelming that I can't remember his name, and I just watched the movie like 2 months ago, and I've watched my review of it several times since then, so yeah. I'm sorry, Voice of Anakin, you can't save this one. While I really like the designs that were introduced in this movie, and the score is surprisingly good, its main character is left with an unfinished arc. Like Bad Blood, the first third of this film is actually alright, with a decent focus on Arthur Curry as he recently lost his father. But from there, he becomes completely flat. The rest of the league just shouldn't have been there. They contribute nothing to Arthur's story, and their inclusion only serves to take screen time away from him. As I said in the review, they should have either made an Aquaman movie or a Justice League movie, not try to do both. Number 27, Justice League War. Score, 3 out of 10. Is this movie as boring as Throne of Atlantis and Crisis on Two Earths? No. This movie is actually pretty entertaining. That said, it's entertaining for being so bad, as well as having not so enjoyable bad stuff on top of that. All of the characters are annoying, either rude, dickish, some kind of misogynist, or any combination of those. The only decent human being in this movie is Barry Allen, and he has maybe 6 lines of dialogue. Really, the only reason it's this high up is because that scene gives me so much joy. The incompetence on display with that 10-second clip gives me life, and I will forever cherish this movie because of that. As for the other 80 minutes though, I could take or leave. Number 26, Teen Titans: The Judas Contract. Score, 3 out of 10. If you don't care about Tara, you don't care about the Judas Contract storyline. I think that's one of the most laser-focused pieces of analysis I've put into this series, and it's the entire reason that this movie ranks so low. Because other than Tara, the rest of the movie is actually okay, probably hovering around a 5 out of 10. Its characters are given lives outside of action scenes, and there are some good bits of development for each of them, even if the film has to grind its narrative to a halt to make room for all of it. The direction is also quite good in places, and some of the dialogue is pretty great as well, but it comes back to Tara. Even considering Young Justice Outsiders doesn't ever give her a personality, this is still somehow worse. I don't know how they did it. Like, how? Why is she this annoying? Number 25, Justice League vs. Teen Titans. Score, 3 out of 10. We have had a lot of 3 out of 10s, 8 to be exact, but I promise this is the last one and also the best one. Why? The boardwalk scene. That's literally it. It was so shockingly good that I almost forgot how bad the rest of the movie is and how much it doesn't belong in the narrative. Damian regresses his character so harshly that it makes the entire movie very hard to enjoy, which isn't helped by every other character lacking the development or the presence to pull my attention away from how annoying he is. The only character that I can really tolerate is Raven, and admittedly, if there's one character for that to be the case, she was it. While Trigon himself is one of the worst villains of the New 52, Raven's connection to him is as engaging as it's always been, and her internal struggle, while left mostly untouched, is welcome whenever it randomly pops up. But really, it's just for that boardwalk scene. Number 24, Superman Unbound. Score, 4 out of 10. I'm aware that I said that this is the most okay movie that I'd seen up to that point, but to me, average is actually slightly below average just because it's so dull. Unbound isn't poorly made, and it doesn't have any glaring flaws, it just didn't interest me. Despite a decent setup, it's the characters that ultimately let the movie down. Superman and Lois only bicker between each other and otherwise are the most bare-bones versions of those characters, and Kara, who should be the main character, is left with 3 emotions: angry, scared, and stoic. She's more robotic than Brainiac, if you can believe it. It's actually so unremarkable that I'm struggling to even come up with 3 paragraphs of recap, and I think that's more telling than any bullshit I can come up with. Number 23. Superman Doomsday. Score, 4 out of 10. The movie that started it all. It unfortunately doesn't hold up that well to a viewing today. While these two storylines were given the split they deserve in the New 52 universe to admittedly mixed success, Doomsday tries to tackle both the death of Superman and shades of Reign of the Supermen at once, and as such, neither is given any time to breathe. I will say that the fight between Superman and Doomsday is one of the highlights of the early films. I don't think any movie until Apokolips really reaches the same heights, and even that film's fights lose out hard in scale. Barring time to develop his character, the filmmakers cleverly show Superman's character in the fight itself, which I thought was a very inspired choice. That said, the second half of this movie hovers around 2 out of 10 in terms of quality, making for a very hard watch. The clone storyline just isn't as interesting, even compared to Doomsday being a dull villain, which I went into in my Death of Superman critique. Throw in some very out of place and cringy homoerotic dialogue by Lex Luthor, and you get a thoroughly uncomfortable viewing experience to start your journey into this catalog. Number 22, Justice League: The New Frontier. Score, 4 out of 10. From the first film directly to the second, this movie continues Doomsday's attempt of trying to tackle too much, which is the catalog's most recurring issue by far. I actually really like the concept of this being a transitory plot, of the old guard gradually being supplanted by and or aided by the new. However, that idea doesn't resonate at all when 4 of the 6 key players are boring and one-dimensional. Only the Flash and Hal Jordan really survive the character purge, and the Flash only barely. It's Jordan that's the star here, and his arc is the only one that lands for me, which sucks because he's focused on so little compared to the everything else that this movie tries to do. If they just made a movie about him that didn't suck, we'd be fine. Unfortunately, we got this mess. Number 21, Wonder Woman: Bloodlines. Score, 4 out of 10. Once again, this is a very nothing burger movie for me, and the only reason it's this high is because it's the only 4 out of 10 that doesn't have one really glaring flaw. Its pacing is fine, its characters and story were fine, the animation and direction were fine, and so on and so forth. It's essentially a very, very, very slightly better version of Superman Unbound in terms of quality. Its biggest flaw, if you could call it one, is its main character. And though Diana doesn't go through much of an arc, the good voice actress, good design, and good work that she does as a mentor or paragon to Vanessa saves her from being truly bad. And hey, once again, I'm struggling to come up with a third paragraph, so we're moving on. Number 20, Batman: Gotham Knight. Score, 5 out of 10. This is really more of a strong 4 to a light 5 for me, but I think it has enough here that it doesn't need to be counted among the 4s of my ranking. This clip show has plenty going for it if you're into this kind of thing. For one, the Japanese animation is a very welcome change of pace, with the harsh lighting really adding to that one scene immensely. Though my calling it that one scene highlights the main problem. Nothing is tightly connected, and while it looks cool, there's nothing there for me to latch onto and remember. The only thing I really do remember in terms of analysis is that I liked how we got closer and closer to Bruce Wayne as it went on, from a bunch of kids telling stories to the police who work with him, until we eventually get to the heart of why he fights crime the way he does at the end. That was pretty good stuff, but it ultimately couldn't let it break past being right in the middle of the pack. Number 19, Batman: Gotham by Gaslight. Score, 5 out of 10. This is one of the movies that does some things much better than those below it, and some things much worse. I've made it clear that I don't like Elseworld stories, and I simply can't get over how this style of crime fighting could never realistically work in this time period. Apart from that, the villain was also immensely disappointing, and the animation was below average. That said, there was some artful stuff going on here, such as the blimp fight, Selina Kyle, and the reveal scene itself with the great music was a welcome moment. There are definitely good things in this movie, and I'd be remiss not to mention them. However, with all those negatives and maybe the most rush ending of the entire catalog, it struggles to excel in my mind. Number 18, Batman vs. Robin. Score, 5 out of 10. The second entry of the Damian trilogy is an admittedly rocky one, but is done with much more care and nuance than its surrounding films. Damian is actually a decent character in this movie, with a good amount of struggle over whose side to choose, Batman or Talon. And while his plan falls apart logically by the end, Talon stands out as one of the more interesting and magnetic characters of the New 52 line, and with such a cool design and that much charisma, it makes sense to me why Damian would fall prey to his trap. That said, the limp ending, strange pacing, jarring character conflict between Damian and Batman, and shaky animation at best keep this film from being anything more than average. It is good to think about after the fact, but in the moment, it's pretty boring to watch. Number 17, Reign of the Supermen. Score, 5 out of 10. The follow-up to one of the best entries of the New 52 was a disappointing mess which has all of the hallmarks of a bad New 52 film. Too many characters, not enough focus, and too fast of pace to keep track of it all. While the villain had the potential to tell a great story about the dangers of idol worship, the sheer mass of characters dilutes any and all pathos to be gained from his story, Clark and Lois's reunion, or any of the other plot threads that the film tries to tackle. Add on top of that a nonsensical Darkseid plot, Lex Luthor being the worst character in the entire catalog, and lackluster direction in scenes, and you have a movie that you just wish wouldn't have been made, if only because what you would imagine the sequel to The Death of Superman would be is immensely better. Number 16, Batman Hush. Score, 5 out of 10. This movie is to Batman what The Death of Superman is to Superman, a character study. It's the first New 52 movie to focus on the Batman character, despite him being in so many of them. And for all of its flaws, it does do this well. Batman is a good character in this movie. It's just everything else that falls apart. For having at least 6 members of the Bat family at the end of Bad Blood with Batgirl on the rise, we only see 3 of them in this movie. Batman, Nightwing, and Batgirl, who only has a glorified cameo, as well as Damian with an actual cameo over video call, no less. Besides the none of them that show up, we have tons of villain appearances as well as a Superman inclusion that all serve to distract from the core story that's being told, diluting its effect immensely, as well as another bad ending which resets everything back to where it was at the start of the film. Number 15, Green Lantern Emerald Knights. Score, 5 out of 10. The second clip show is actually better than the first. Go figure. It uses the framing device of the newbie being told stories about different lanterns, which we then experience as the vignettes. It features some of the best lantern fights in the catalog, and it's perhaps the first movie to respect the Green Lanterns for being these supremely powerful space policemen. Where it falls apart is in its nature. We don't have a lot of time to connect with any of the characters found within the different clips, and some of them are better than others, with at least one that should have been cut entirely in my opinion. Add on top of that reused designs from First Flight, a bland main character if you could even call her that, and lackluster hand-to-hand combat and music, and this sits around the middle of the pack for me. Number 14, Superman Red Sun. Score, 5 out of 10. Hey, it's another Elseworld story. Neat. I don't have much to say on this one either, if only because I simply don't like Elseworld stories that much. The villains were bad, the pacing was wonky in some places, and there was some major favoritism shown with the power scaling, and that's not even mentioning the movie's overt and frankly confused politics. But hey, Superman himself is a decent character, and it's his journey of realizing the depths that he's sunk in his rule that serves as an effective through line, as well as what might be the best Lex Luthor we've gotten in the entire catalog, if only because he wasn't annoying here. And hey, if nothing else, the score is great, so if you're into that, you can take it. Personally though, I'd rather leave it. Number 13, Batman the Killing Joke. Score, 5 out of 10. I think this movie is in the top 5 most interesting films to talk about in this catalog, while being one of the top 5 least enjoyable ones to actually watch. It takes a very specific person to actually like this movie all the way through. Its two halves, the Batgirl prologue and the Killing Joke proper, are so incongruous and strangely put together that people were bound to be mad about it, let alone that the vast majority of people prefer one half much more than the other. For me, I enjoyed the Batgirl prologue way more than the Killing Joke, which I found boring and only there for shock value. More than any other entry, this film's score does not define its watching experience. The 5 out of 10 is only there for my weighing its pros and cons as objectively as I could muster, and its placement this high up in the rankings is largely because of how fun it is to analyze it. But as a movie, it's worse than many others that we've already looked at here. To put it into perspective, I would rather watch Batman Bad Blood before this one. Number 12, Batman Assault on Arkham. Score, 5 out of 10. Believe it or not, we had more 5s than 3s in this list. This movie is similar to Wonder Woman Bloodlines in that it's the best of its number ranking because it doesn't do anything particularly badly. Really, its biggest flaw for me is the tasteless treatment of its female characters, but that's like 3 little scenes that don't ultimately matter. What separates this film from the other 5s is that it's more enjoyable to watch than unenjoyable, making it more of a strong 5 to a light 6. It's a fun watch with an actually logical ending to a Suicide Squad Squad movie, with everyone turning on each other like the bastards they are. And don't worry, the how and why is still interesting, so that's not necessarily a spoiler. That said, just as it doesn't do anything that badly, it also doesn't stand out in any area either. It's a fun movie to watch while drunk, but it offers very little else of consequence. Number 11. Justice League, Gods and Monsters. Score, 6 out of 10. If it weren't for the horrendous final act, this movie would sit comfortably in the 7s and maybe even the low 8s, depending on my mood. Unfortunately, it features one of the worst climaxes of the catalog because of its logical inconsistencies, convoluted twists, and having an open-ended ending which was never delivered upon. However, everything else about the movie is top-notch. While it relies on 2 very long flashbacks, 3 if you count the prologue, which I personally don't, I can't say I really minded because they were all so interesting and enjoyable, effectively setting up each new version of these characters, and it features some of the strongest writing of the series, both in terms of plotting and in terms of dialogue. I think more than anything, that I wanted to see more of this world and these characters says that I liked the film. For however little time I spent with them, I might even say I liked these versions of the DC Trinity more than their counterparts in the New 52, so take that how you will. Number 10. Superman, Batman, Public Enemies. Score, 6 out of 10. Speaking of fun, dumb rides, this movie feels like Batman Assault on Arkham just done better. It has almost nothing of substance, and many of the decisions that are made by the characters don't make a lot of sense, but damn is it a fun time. While the constant use of fight scenes gets a bit old after a while, and there is a cop-out ending with Lex Luthor being an awful villain again, the fight scenes themselves are very enjoyable, with some of the better animation for the early days of the catalog, and some of the better choreography on top of that. What really lets it down from being high on the list, however, is the shallowness of it all. It's a fun, dumb action movie and nothing else. Does that mean that the equivalent of a Fast and Furious film makes it into the top 10? Yes. Yes, it does. Number 9. Justice League vs. The Fatal 5. Score, 7 out of 10. Once again, we're riding the line here between a strong 6 to a light 7, but I think the strength of this film's 2 main characters is enough to bump it into the upper echelons of the ranking. Jessica Cruz and Thomas Kaller really shine here, and them dealing with their respective mental illnesses was fun and enjoyable to watch. I like that the movie is able to poke fun at their respective natures, even though by no means are the illnesses treated lightly. Jessica's character arc in particular resonated with me, and she definitely stands out as the best character not only in this movie, but probably the best since before the New 52 era began. That said, the Fatal 5 is the worst villain team in the catalog, so you win some, you lose some. Still a good movie. Number 8. Batman Under the Red Hood. Score, 7 out of 10. I actually wanted to score this higher originally, either the best 7 or the worst 8. I ultimately decided against it because of the various little things that annoyed me while watching. Jokey Nightwing sucks, there were like too many action scenes for the story to support, and a lot of the animation felt rushed and or choppy. On the other hand, the film features some of the best rivalries and final battles of the whole catalog, and Jason Todd stands out as a fantastic villain and ideological counterpart to Batman, as they fight for essentially the same thing, but with very different methodologies. And that ending scene is just phenomenal, with some of the best dialogue and voice acting I've ever seen in one of these movies. You can just feel the pain right along with Jason at being abandoned and left unavenged. Great stuff. Number 7. The Death of Superman. Score, 7 out of 10. What a strange and unexpected turn for the New 52. Now, we did have another 7 out of 10 in that category before this that you'll hear about shortly, but this is the first film in that universe that wasn't an ensemble piece that was actually competent. With the generally shorter lengths of these movies, this character study fits the pace much better than those did, and surprise surprise, when you play to your strengths, you get a better result. Speaking of playing to one's strengths, this movie is everything great about Superman and really tries to zero in on the heart of the character in a way that hasn't been attempted before this point in the catalog, to great success. Superman is finally a good character. Unfortunately, it also has Doomsday in it, and Doomsday is the worst thing to ever be created under the DC label, which is why this movie isn't any higher, even though I really wanted it to be. It's also the best looking of the New 52, so it stings even more because it's gorgeous. Number 6. Justice League Doom. Score, 7 out of 10. I was shocked to my core upon watching this movie. It was so surprisingly good that I almost didn't believe it. The artfulness, the pacing, the characters, and the dialogue, it's all just phenomenal, especially compared to what I compared it to in the critique, Crisis on Two Earths. If there is a big flaw in this movie, it would be that Vandal Savage and Cyborg aren't that interesting, and the Legion of Doom is pretty underdeveloped. But those are small gripes when looking at just how enjoyable this movie is to watch on a moment-to-moment basis. I would dare say that I would watch it over the next two entries, but as for which of them is truly better, I still have to keep it just out of the top 5. For all of the things this movie does right, it also has pretty generic action animation, a equally generic score, and doesn't truly stand out in any way. It seems like we have one movie for each number that just epitomizes the average, not good, not bad, ideal for each ranking. And this is it for the 7s. Still comes highly recommended by me though. Number 5. Justice League Dark. Score 7 out of 10. This is bar none the best movie set in the New 52 universe, save for one which some don't even count. It has immensely enjoyable and instantly iconic characters, an intriguing story about possession and magic, great chemistry between the characters, and absolutely fantastic action animation pretty much throughout its entire run. However, that's all it has. And I know how that sounds, but when I think about my absolute favorites from this catalog, I think about what they say to me and how much I personally resonate with the story and characters. And for as fun and good as this movie is from a critical perspective, it doesn't speak to me in that way. It's all there, but everything that I personally care about in a favorite is underdeveloped. The characters and the lore most prominently. However, that can be taken as a compliment, as it just meant that I wanted more. And by God, did I want more, because the next movie I had to watch was... that. Number 4. Wonder Woman. Score 8 out of 10. It's hard to believe that such an early entry into the catalog could reach this high for me, but here we are. Despite all of the competition, this movie remains my favorite iteration of the Wonder Woman character in the whole series because of her earnestness, her determination, and that she really had to fight and work to achieve what she wanted. It was one of the few times that I bought the romance between the two main leads. As though Steve Trevor is a bit of a scoundrel, in the end he sticks by Diana even through the dangers of fighting gods and has her back when she needs it, earning her respect if nothing else. I just love how both of them work to better each other. Diana pushes Trevor to act more selflessly and gives him the experience of the Amazon world, while Trevor helps Diana broaden her horizons and discard a lot of her naivete through showing her around the outside world in their search. Oh, and the rest of the movie is good too, but really it's this high up due to the strength of its characters. Number 3. Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox. Score 8 out of 10. If you count this among the New 52 films, then this is the best, yes, but I'm not so sure it fits due to the myriad continuity errors there are between this film and those. That said, whether you consider it among that trash heap or not, Flashpoint Paradox is an excellent film. Except, it really isn't. It doesn't make logical sense. Most of the character designs are ugly as sin with way too big of chests and way too small of heads. The music is bland, no one is given proper development with only one exception, and the world is so convenient with its character placements and timeline, and is so grimdark edgy that it's really hard to stomach. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care about any of that, because Barry Allen is one of the absolute best main characters we've ever gotten in the entire catalog. Better than any Superman, better than any Wonder Woman, better than almost everyone else. His storyline and character arc and final choice are so powerful that it single-handedly shoots this movie up to this spot, and that is some strong stuff. Number 2. Superman Batman Apokolips. Score 9 out of 10. Up until about 5 minutes ago as of writing this, Apokolips sat at the top of the 8s, but no, this is a 9. Why? For me, 10 out of 10s are perfect films. Maybe not technically or objectively or to you, but for my tastes and for my money, they have no flaws. 9 out of 10s are also perfect movies, but they don't speak to me on a fundamental level. This movie has no flaws. It looks gorgeous, sounds great, has a phenomenal score, phenomenal voice acting across the board, has great designs, the fights are badass, the direction is fantastic, the storyline is engaging, but more than any of that, as with Flashpoint Paradox, it has one of the best main characters with the best arcs in Kara Zor-El. Her battle to gain true autonomy is wonderful to see unfold, and it's one of the few examples where I see a potential flaw in the narrative that Kara lacks agency throughout like 90% of the film to its advantage by making that the entire point. There is not a single moment of this film that I don't enjoy experiencing, and if that doesn't make it at least a 9 out of 10, then I don't know what to say. Just go watch this movie, please. At the very least, it's an entertaining action flick, and to me, it's so much more. Number 1, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Score, 10 out of 10. Was it ever going to be anything else? No. Not in a million years would anything have ever surpassed one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. It features the best everything in my book. Action, direction, lighting, voice acting, everything. But as for why it speaks to me on such a personal level, it's due to its view on the nature of humanity. That left alone, it would destroy itself, but with a guiding hand, it's capable of the impossible. That with enough discipline, a man is able to defeat a god. It's not through sheer force that Batman is able to control the most dangerous generation of Gotham, but it's through inspiring them to be better. Real talk, my one goal in life is, through my work, either this YouTube channel or through my eventual novels, is to inspire people to be better in the same way that Batman does in this film. And that's why I love it so much. While our methods may be different, I hope that I can be just like Batman one day. And until that day comes, I will always love this film. And I hope even beyond that, until I've had a good death. Thank you all for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Until the end, my friends.